Silver era bodybuilding was where the birth of bodybuilding really happened. So many consider Steve Reeves to be the greatest bodybuilder of all time, and he was from the silver era. There was also Reg Park in conversation as well, but someone that really pioneered bodybuilding was Steve Reeves. He even got into Hollywood, which then Arnold of course followed his footsteps as well. Most, if not all of those bodybuilders were training with high frequency and high volume as well. So their splits were most likely full body. When you ask most of those bodybuilders, or they've documented it, it was full body workouts 3 times a week, heavily focused on health and good nutrition, which was based around meats, cheese, dairy products, which bled into the golden era as well. Just overall, the main focus was just on health and their physique, the proportions. We're not going to talk much about the bronze era because although they had great strength feats and the physiques were awesome, the bench press wasn't around at the time. And so we can't really consider that as a complete physique with chests that were lacking, unfortunately. And there was some experimentation, I believe, with upper-lower training as well. The majority of it was high frequency, high volume, which full body worked the best. So there's a YouTube channel by the name of Golden Era Bookworm. He talks about the start of steroids. I think he was on a podcast sort of video with someone named the Natty Life or Natty Bodybuilding, something like that. And they talk about how steroids actually started appearing in magazines and adverts and things like that about 1930s. So the silver era was from 1938-ish, I think 1940 to 1960. And during that period, there was many claims of companies basically saying this will boost your testosterone, this will do this will put muscle on your frame. However, I think Golden Era Bookworm did deep research, so he had magazines and stuff, and he looked into the fact that the steroids or the chemicals that were available back then were most likely, so 99% chance was that they just didn't work. So he was saying the testosterone that was synthesized back then, 1938 I believe it was, it just wasn't able to stay in your system long enough for it to actually do anything. So essentially useless. The reason I mention that is because just so we can hone on the fact that all these guys, be it with amazing genetics, they were all natural. The general lifting population, they wouldn't have access to steroids as well. And there's been documented that those physiques were fantastic. And of course, just like anything, when you make something, it develops, it evolves. And surely it happened. 1960, Diana Ball was then released. That became available to athletes. And then the bodybuilders started using that. And that's when we saw the shift to the golden era. Around 1960s, we saw bodybuilders coming through the ranks. And then slowly, of course, in the 1970s, Schwarzenegger really got eyes onto bodybuilding as well. So now when we look back into time, or anyone that looks at bodybuilding, the first name that comes into their head is Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Pumping iron came, that was a massive impact as well. So from that point forward, then we go forward even further. So those physiques were big, brought all the eyes into bodybuilding. And then later on, I personally believe it was Yates that brought the monster era, with what I call. So he came in at something completely different. There was people competing already, but then when he came onto the scene, it was like an explosion. Everyone was like, can a human even look like this? Is this even real? So Yates then brought the monster era. The bigger the better. And then proportions got out of control, drug use of course. But it was Yates that then shifted all the bodybuilders' focus from health and well-being and physique, proportions, everything, to just being absolute monsters. Now, if you're more interested about the development of steroids and which athletes were natural or not natural back then in the bronze era, I would highly recommend the channel that I mentioned earlier, the Golden Bookworm. Now, I would just like to talk about what we can learn from the silver era. We ruled out steroids, and the main component I want to focus on is how those physiques looked so fantastic without the use of any drugs at all. Whereas today, most lifters will just give in to steroids so easily because they believe natural limit is so low. The image that's been painted of natural lifting and natural bodybuilding right now these days is atrocious completely. We seem to have some sort of amnesia when we look at physiques. We don't go as far as silver and bronze era to take a look at, you know what, these guys with the lack of resources, lack of knowledge and everything were able to create physiques that walk the earth of that caliber, and how most of us most likely will not look like Steve Reeves ever. He had top genetics, but even if we looked as half or even 25% of what his physique was, most people would be happy with that. So if we can't even achieve that with all the information and knowledge we have now, something has to be wrong. Which leads me to talking about how we have amazing resources and research, and then people in our own lifting, me as well, we all look at our minute details, you know, the 1% here, the 2% here, how we can do things that will optimize our training to make sure we get the most gains. However, we don't realize we have all this high quality information already. People that mentioned Steve Reeves, Reg Park, and all the bronze era lifters before then as well, they all have done this already. They've created the blueprint for us. Sure, there's more information now. Sure, we're more well versed, but Has that got us anywhere? Have we really improved on things in terms of what we look like right now without steroids? Have we achieved physiques like that already? I would go as far as to say, not really at all. So why are we looking at these 1%, 2% differences, and why aren't we focusing on things that they did do correct? The basic principles of health first, recovery, training, having a good time, making sure you're not sandbagging your training, you know, just lifting more, just doing more, and getting all the quality in. If we focus on just those basics and those their work ethic and what the ethos was for silver era bodybuilding, a lot of us could go really, really far. Which leads me to something else. I've noticed in the UK, at least where I am, most lifters I speak to, and I go to my gym as well, we're all focusing on doing less. Everyone is trying to find a way where we can do less and get more. The first thing someone says is, oh, how many sets do you do? Oh, if you do one set really, really hard, you can gain this much muscle. If you train a little bit less, you know, lower volume, less cardio, no cardio. It's almost the equivalent of, I'm not sure if you guys have had this, but when someone out of shape, someone slightly overweight would say, they would ask you, they'd be like, so what can you eat to make you lose weight? So what can I eat to make myself be in better shape? It's almost the equivalent of that. That's the way I see it. When that's not the right question, you know? The real question is, what can I do more to do better? That's what the real question should be. We've lost sight of that, I believe. Now, to summarize this, all these principles and everything I've talked about, there's one person specifically that is a makeup of everything that I've spoken about, and the mindset and the ethos and the work ethic, and his name, which I'm about to butcher right now, but he's going to be on screen anyway. Hersoviak, French lifter, and he has truly embodied what silver era bodybuilding is. His physique, I would probably say, I'll go as far as to say, is probably one of the best physiques I've ever seen, with proportions and just the way overall he looked. And he's received his accolades from all over YouTube. I know Natural Hypertrophy's done a video on him as well. He truly is what silver era bodybuilding was. And it's amazing to see, really, in this era as well, where we have these mass monsters and all these people that are focusing so much on just finding new ways to do things constantly, and sandbagging their own training, putting themselves behind. Whereas this person here, Hersoviak, he's basically got the principles of silver era lifting, done his research, and basically improved on those things that he felt necessary. However, he stuck to the basics of what the silver era was, and he's taken it to another level. And that package you see is achievable for a lot of people. I would say a lot of people can probably achieve that, most likely, and done so naturally as well, which I do believe Hersoviak is. Let's all zoom out and take a trip back to 1940s in the silver era and see what we can find from there, and then come back into the future and apply that into your own training. And most of us will lift until we're alive. However, the time to make your overall physique and enjoy that is short. So let's make use of it. Put this all into practice now. Let's just make it count. Thank you for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video. Take care and peace.